Welcome to F1 on the Rocks. Sit back and pour up your favorite drink. Hey, we're not the ones behind the wheel.
Hello.
Technical difficulties.
Welcome back. We had some technical difficulties, but that's all right. We're here. We got it rocking and rolling. I'm Brian Dower. I'm here with my buddy Will Smith, and we have just witnessed, hands down, the race of the year. Hands down.
Race. What a sick race, man.
Maybe the race of my F1. I've never seen a better race. But before we dive in, because we got a ton to talk about, what is up, my man? I see that Cale Makar jersey in the background.
Yeah, I'm still living the Colorado Avalanche Stanley Cup life. That's what we should be doing, honestly. Took a long time to get that victory, but good, man. It was awesome. Nice holiday weekend, 4th of July. Obviously, got to lounge around. Got to do some fun stuff with the family and take a little bit of disconnect. Always got to love those 3-day weekends. How was your fourth, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, it was good, man. Just the usual, hanging in the pool with the kids, doing some swimming. Had some more plumbing issues this week. Yeah, nightmare. I gave up and called the plumber. They came out on the 4th of July. Long story short, won't get into it, but we had bathtub issues that I just called in the pros.
Yeah,
but
you know how it is, those home maintenance tasks, right? You start here and then it just creeps into this task, and before you know it, you're doing like 3 months of construction on something you had never planned.
Right, right, and spent way more money than if I had just paid someone to do it in the first place. So, I'm all good, man.
Did you guys win the hockey championship?
Oh, we did. I got on a sick team. So there's not enough goalies. There's 8 teams in the league, not enough goalies. So we kind of rotate. I got put with the 1 seed, and I played average, and we won by like 6 goals. But it was sweet. We got the trophy, skating around with it and everything.
Nice.
So
your
it
own
was
Stanley
awesome.
Cup celebration of sorts.
Exactly.
Nice. Hey, listen, I got to give you some shit here. We had a listener suggestion. It was from one of our avid listeners, Michael Kohler. He said, can we give listener suggestion to Brian's drink selection? At this point, we would even take a White Claw. I think the vodka thing is starting to bother him. But what are you sipping on today?
I had Woodford Reserve the other day, but he must have skipped that episode. But so I grabbed it out of the fridge on the way here. I do enjoy Topo Chicos, but I grabbed a margarita hard seltzer. I'm not a margarita guy, and it's strawberry hibiscus margarita hard seltzer.
Super fruity.
Oh my gosh. So I've already texted my wife and said, hey, once you get the kids to bed, can you bring me a beer?
Yeah, you said you're a bigger fan of High Noon anyways, right? So
I am. I like the Nooners. They don't give me the hangover like the others do. But what are you drinking, my friend?
My lovely darling wife, you're going to laugh, Mike's going to love this one, made me a Tito's Cosmopolitan. So I've got the vodka today in a proper glass, shaken with a little bit of ice.
Well done. Wow. I'm impressed.
Yeah, killing it. So, hey, we've got F1, we've got the rocks. Let's talk some race, man. Some race
Let's
review.
Do it. Yeah.
What did you think of the practice sessions? Was there anything outstanding? Anything cool?
Not necessarily. Would we have one wet, one dry, and one kind of half and half, maybe? Oh, that first session was useless.
Yeah, about the same.
Yeah. So that was kind of a bummer, but a lot of celebs. You see, I'm sure you saw him, Keanu.
Yep. Keanu is in the pits hanging out with the Aston Martin team. And what was funny is he's sitting there and like somebody rips in. I think it might have been Seb, like rips in and pits out and like zips out. And Keanu's just like, oh, like, he's got the stunned Keanu face on. I thought it was pretty good. And then Gordon Ramsay was hanging out with his daughter in the Red Bull pit, I think, right?
Yeah, I saw that. Did you see the article or the pictures of him giving the Red Bull mechanic shit?
No. What happened?
Oh, dude, it was great. So, like, in between practice sessions or something, some Red Bull mechanic, like, has this little, like, shepherd's pie, eating it out of the foil, and Gordon Ramsay starts harassing him about it. Like, the other Red Bull mechanics were there, busting balls and stuff. It was great.
Yeah, his go-to recipes is the beef Wellington and obviously shepherd's pie. So, yeah, good stuff. Well, then we moved into qualifying and kind of carried some of that wetness with us. It was super disappointing for me because I was just like really amped to see all of these new upgrades in like fast action, and it was just kind of like wah wah.
Totally. At least you're not on the Williams team. I mean, how pissed must they be? We'll get into the race side of it, but we've got to mention Latifi. I mean, qualifying was a wet quali, right? And nothing terribly dramatic. I mean, Latifi made it to Q3. Good for him. Some could say it was kind of lucky. So what happened in Q2 is, they got maybe halfway through Q2 and then the rain got really heavy, and Latifi, had a good banker lap, and nobody could improve in the last 8 minutes of Q2, and he got himself into Q3. So good for him. Can't take it away.
Always good to hear the radio calls from the wall on that too, where they're like, "Hey, we need you to push here. Like this is your last shot before it starts getting soaked over here." So it's nice to know that they're on the radar. Obviously, if you get halfway around the track in the second half of the track, you've been blazing. You got a super fast sector 1 and 2, and you get to 3, and it's like drenched. It's like bummer. There goes that lap. It's a good one. For sure.
So obviously it ends up with Carlos on pole. He was incredibly surprised. That the team came on the radio, and I love the Ferrari engineers. They just have like that perfect Italian accent. P1.
and he's like, I wasn't even trying.
Yeah.
That's basically what he said.
Couldn't believe it. But it was because obviously Verstappen would have been on pole, and Sainz only beat him by, I don't know, a couple hundredths maybe. Yeah. Leclerc spun on his last lap in Q3. Verstappen was behind him. That threw the yellow flag. Verstappen had to lift. And obviously didn't get pole because of it. So that's why Sainz was so surprised, because I don't think he put in a great lap either. He was probably expecting both Verstappen and his teammate Leclerc to be ahead of him. But anyway, so that was cool. I don't know if you saw Nigel Mansell. He was the one like holding the wheel and signed the wheel after for the Pirelli pole position stuff. Yeah. He gave the most aggressive handshake to Carlos Sainz, dude. It's like, bro, he's got a race tomorrow, man. Yeah. Take it easy.
Easy on the wrists, dude. Easy on the wrists. Yeah.
So that was quali. We've got to buzz through quali. We buzzed through practice to get to this epic race.
I mean, it was just so sick. And you said at the beginning, like, this was one of the best races that you've seen in a while. And it was just like, the suspense was killing me. Every time there was a restart, every time, we came out of the pits, every time we went into the pits, there was something going on. And I was just like, man, this is like, I can't keep up. My ADD is all over the place with this. But yeah, I mean, lap 1, right? You've got a start strategy right out of the gates by Red Bull, max on soft tires, no holds barred. They're not holding punches kind of thing. Like we're going to be in 1 when we come out of the first corner. However, that also put them in a position where they're going to have to take that second stop sometime later in the race.
Exactly.
If there wasn't some sort of safety concern. But yeah, I mean, you saw him leave the start line, and it was like, well, there goes Max. See you later, buddy.
Right. It was like, oh shit, and immediately, like we've seen like 90 meters of the race, and it's like, oh shit, Verstappen's in first. He's going to drive away with this, goddamn.
And all my Max hater friends were not a fan of that situation for sure.
Yeah. And then in the background goes Zhou upside down. It's like, wait, what did I just see there?
Okay, so the play-by-play for this contact was that I was watching the race on a recorded session, and it was
Same.
like just like an hour or so before Rio's like midday nap, and so we're all in the living room. I got it queued up. It starts, and like that happens, and I see the car go flying across, and I'm like, oh my god! and the baby's going nuts, and Bailey's like, I don't know what to do, and they leave the room, and I'm like, I gotta watch this race later, and I like hit pause, and I was like, I can't.
You hit pause right there.
I stopped right there. Because I was like, there's gonna be so much more going on, and this has to have my full attention, and my child deserves my full attention as well. Just got her.
Damn, I cannot believe you had the ability to just pause that and walk away. How long was it until you got back to it?
Like an hour of suspenseful waiting to know like the outcome of the situation, while also basically having to ignore my cell phone because every group text is group texting, every social media post is popping up or whatever. Anyways, I'm glad I did, because I went back and I watched, and you see George Russell ends up making a little bit of contact with the front wing of Gasly, and that causes George's car to basically snap. And when his car snaps, it pops Joe, and Joe just flips and slides. And it was kind of just a crazy thing to watch in that moment. Obviously, you're like, oh no, like this is not what I want to be seeing.
I've got to ask you, and sorry to interrupt, I hate always playing this game, but I love always playing this game too. Who's at fault? Who do you think?
Okay, I went back and rewatched the race start from a couple different angles, and the most important one was from this aerial view, right? So if listeners want to get on Twitter and look up some more clips of this, there's this like helicopter, or it might have even been a drone. I think it was a helicopter view of the start, and it's enlightening to see because what you're used to is everyone in the grid, and occasionally one or two people have a slow start and everybody shifts around them. But what happened last weekend at Silverstone was that like 3 cars had a good start, 1 car had a bad start, 2 cars had a good start, 1 car had a bad start, and it created this weird amalgamation of like holes that could be popped into. And so it was enlightening to see like there was no one driver that caused that havoc. It was several poor starts where people just didn't get on it the way that they needed to, followed by several other drivers like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to make a nice clean pass right up the middle. Right. Squeezes happen, turn comes up, and by then, by that point, even before the turn, Joe's already upside down sliding, so people are trying to dodge, and it just kind of created havoc. I got to give props to the FIA though. I mean, the updates that they made to safety around the track, right? Once Joe's car kind of started flipping and ended up on that fencing, it was there was one guy that you if you go back and watch that aerial view, he's kind of standing literally right where the car ends up in the netting, the fence netting.
You see him running
and he just turns and runs, and he like curls up into a ball, and he gets like 10 feet from the car, and I was just like, woo, that's not a place you want to be.
So I found, just by happenstance, somebody retweeted this guy or whatever, but that guy's a photographer, like an F1 photographer, and he was posting pictures of it, and he's got these, insane pictures of Joe sliding right at him, and he put in his tweet, like, I took these and then, like, ran for my life seconds later.
Yeah, I saw one of the ones that was, like, lit, like, sparks are flying from basically where Joe's head is, So,
wild.
So then you tell me who DNF'd, what was the damage done as a result of that lap 1 wreck?
Yeah, so the crazy thing, the only DNFs, excuse me, are Joe, Russell, who didn't want a DNF, but I think the car was past the point anyway, and Albon. And we didn't really mention Albon yet, but he did kind of the, oh shit, I see what's happening in front of me, let me get off the gas. But when it's that close at the start, Vettel was right behind him, couldn't react in time. I mean, impossible to react in time. Hits the back of him. Albon then goes into the wall, and then comes back out onto the track and takes out a few folks. I think Tsunoda and Ocon. But they red flagged it, right? And with the red flag, you can do work on the car. You can fix all sorts of stuff. I think Ocon had like a broken wishbone suspension in the front that they fixed.
Limped back on like what looked to be like an inner tube of a tire.
Yeah. That was wild. So after that mayhem, it was really kind of crazy that only 3 of them were actually DNF'd at that point. I think we had 6 by the end of the race that we'll obviously get to. But surprising, only 3 there. And then back to the incident before we go. Gasly was kind of the catalyst. So Zhou and George Russell have poor starts. Latifi and Gasly, both behind them, have great starts. Latifi splits him, goes up through him. Gasly starts to go and then realizes, maybe not, backs out. Russell slides over to get a better entrance to the turn and just clips him, like you said. But I don't know. I've seen some people giving Gasly grief for it, but he backed out. I think if you have to put blame somewhere, you put it on Russell. But it's obviously a racing incident. But anyway,
I would have too. Here's the thing: for me, it's the most purest of racing incidents that can happen because it happened within 20 seconds of start, and there wasn't like someone driving diagonally across the grid start. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that at all. I want to blame Russell, but at the same time, I have to just give him credit for being an outstanding sportsman. Like the way that he handled himself, it made me sad that they weren't, obviously they have to follow the rules, that they aren't going to let him back out on the track. But he got out of his car. He checked on, who did he check on first? And then he went and stood on the tire wall while he went right to Joe out of the car. So it wasn't like he was just like, damn, that really sucked that I ran into somebody. It was like, bummer, this all happened. Let me go make sure everybody that I, spend my entire existence with is okay. Which is cool.
For sure. I'm not the biggest George fan, but I can appreciate that. Makes me like him a little bit more. And then I saw Callum Ilott, who raced in feeder series and stuff with George and karting and everything. I think he actually has a full-time seat in IndyCar now, but he's a young guy. He tweeted that, hey, I rolled my cart once in a karting race, and George was the first one to pull over and get out of his cart and help me out too. So that's cool. I can appreciate that. Being a good human is nice.
So lap 1, again, technically lap 2, I think. lap 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
But why? Like,
Again.
what happens? What is that?
Yeah, so they kept the original order, and I had no idea, but it's because they never reached the second safety car line, and so there's 2 safety car lines on every track. The first safety car line is essentially the pit entry, and the second safety car line is the pit exit. And because all of the cars didn't reach the pit exit until before it was red flagged, they said, "Hey, we don't really have an official order. Start it back the way it was," which I was kind of surprised, like. Nobody said boo about, but obviously it just must be a kind of a standard racing rule.
Yeah, it seems like something Horner would have thrown a little tit fit about, but
Right.
obviously it paid advantages for Carlos in that instance because he studied, he learned. I'm sure while they were sitting there, someone was like, here's the exact line you need to run to keep him out of your nose every time you get around to a corner, and it's exactly what he ran it. He ran those first 3 corners exactly the way that they needed to be done. But yeah, give me the breakdown on what happened with the cars kind of behind Carlos at that standpoint, because the race after that second start came with cars 2, 3, 4 in that instance.
It was wild. I mean, it was like watching a karting event, how close these guys were at the start and then staying close. So anyway, they start out, Sainz really pushes Verstappen to the inside. Verstappen kind of has to go over a little bit of the grass, so Sainz stays in first through the first, obviously, a handful of laps, 10, 12, 15 laps, whatever it was. But behind him was really some kind of wild action. We have Hamilton, we've got Perez, we've got Leclerc, and then in front of them is obviously Verstappen and Sainz, and they're through Village. They're about to finish the turn to come around to the, I think to the Wellington Straight, I guess it's called, but it's turn 4 or 5. And Checo goes to the inside, and Leclerc was coming up the inside as well, and Leclerc had no other option but to chuck it inside at that point. And Leclerc and Checo kind of make that turn, almost clip Sainz and Verstappen. I mean, it was inches to spinning both of those guys out. But a lot of people, when looking at that, are like, geez, what was Leclerc thinking, chucking it inside? But then you go to the onboard of Leclerc, and Checo makes the move inside, and Leclerc's like, I have nothing else to do but to go inside. They make contact. They both have wing damage. Checo goes in to the pit to get a new wing, front wing, when Leclerc stayed out, and the dude was just as fast without an end plate. They said he was missing 5 points of downforce.
Yeah, he was putting work in on the car, and you and I both know that from the video games, when you lose your front wing, it typically means that any other corner you drive into after that, you're going into a wall again, because you just can't, like, the car doesn't respond without that downforce. Yeah. And so, yeah, remarkable that he did that. Remarkable that he just kept like crushing and pushing up behind Sainz. I mean, that kind of steady climb back through the pack really is in part for Perez due to the fact that he actually went in and got that wing fixed immediately and got on a new set of tires. Like, if he hadn't done what he did, I don't think we see him on the podium. So props to him and strategy and Red Bull for kind of just, ripping the Band-Aid off, being like, damn, wish this didn't happen, but let's get back to work. And there's a lot of race left. So,
He's the tire whisperer, man. I mean, him and Hamilton are probably the 2 best on the grid. So, everybody knows Checo goes in 6 laps to get his 3 laps in, whatever it was, to get his wing fix, and he's putting on a set of mediums. He's going to ride those things out as long as he can until
30
maybe he gets the safety car.
Yeah, a 30 lap stint on mediums without any real suffering, without no complaining. You don't hear him doing the Hamilton, man, these tires are really going on me, right? Like, he just drove the car, and then suddenly there was a safety car. So, what's interesting is, like, we're talking about cars 1 through 4, right? The Ferraris and Red Bulls, but, like, behind them, you've got Lando and Hammy side by side through, I think, like, probably sector 1 and 2, almost
of the lap.
An entire lap.
Yeah.
Lando and Hammy were duking it out back and forth. And that's always fun to see for me, because it's like, look, you got young Lando and you got a 7-type world champ going after it with each other, and they're just kind of trading corners, like giving each other space. Like, I really want this spot, but our cars aren't really faster than each other, so we're just going to drive next to each other. Like, that was pretty cool. But yeah.
Just a couple Brits taking a Sunday drive at their home track.
Yeah. Yep.
So Max is fast, right? And we won't go lap through this thing, but we want to talk about the race quite a bit. So Max is fast. He gets past Carlos, and maybe like half a lap after that picks up damage.
Yep.
And it ended up being a piece of debris that was from an AlphaTauri. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but Yuki chucks it inside on Gasly. Just dive bomb, spins them both out. Synchronized spinning, by the way, which was quite impressive. Thank you. I got my replacement.
Hey, Bridget.
Will says hello. So synchronized spinning, excuse me, both cars are damaged, and Verstappen ends up running it over. So he runs over a piece of front wing, AlphaTauri front wing, that after the race they pulled out from under his car. It was stuck under his car. The thing was like this. It was like a shoebox.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Really?
Oh, dude, it was crazy. I mean, bigger than like someone's head. It was enormous. So that was what was stuck under the car.
Okay.
And as you know, with these new regs, they get the vast majority of their downforce from the floor.
Right.
And Max said, he's like, I was coming up on it. I couldn't go left of it. I couldn't go right of it. So I tried to go right over dead center of it, hoping that would, help somehow. It got jammed under there. They thought he had a puncture. So they brought him in, did a tire change. And
that's what he was saying. It
still feels like shit.
Yeah. He thinks that he's like, I think I'm losing pressure. Yeah. So
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he was able to make it into the pit, I think helped. But then when he left the pit, right, that instant sense of frustration set in when he was like, damn, it wasn't the tire. Now I've got to figure out what to do. And I think there was a certain point when Horner came on the radio and was like, hey man, it's damage control at this point. Like you've got what you've got. It's limited downforce. You're gonna have to make do with it what you can do. So
yeah, it was reminiscent of Hungary last year when Bottas went bowling on the first turn in Hungary and knocked everybody out, and Verstappen had that huge damage and drove the whole race. Ended up getting like 3 points maybe or 4 points.
Yeah,
you know what?
Points. Yeah.
It helped out when at the end of the season he won by a very little margin. So
yeah, yep. Well, I almost wanted to name today's episode "To Sprint or Not to Sprint." That is the question. 39th lap, that safety car by way of Ocon's pump failure, right? So Ocon ends up having some sort of pump issue and just kind of like coast to a stop on the grid starting line. Probably one of the worst places really to stop, considering if it was like a little bit earlier, he could have just pulled into the pit. But yeah. Safety car rolls out. I feel bad for Ocon. He was kind of crushing it, but we get the safety car, a couple laps go around, and we resume at the 43rd lap. And away we go to what I'm calling like a straight up, like a sprint to the finish. Yeah. Sainz takes Leclerc. And at that point, he's kind of like basically thinking to himself, I've been waiting for this all season long. I'm not even going to have this conversation with you. The strategy calls that you're making are not the right strategy calls. We'll get to that later. But without hesitation, he took action, and I love it. I love the fact that he made a decisive move and said, no, I'm driving the car, and this is what I'm doing. So, secondly, after Perez after Leclerc leaves an inside corner, Hamilton just squeezes by. Like Perez and Leclerc are kind of forced out, and Hamilton, being the veteran driver that he is, like sees that nice little wide opening that they gave him, probably knowing that they were going to end up in that position, kind of like prepped for it coming into that corner. Squeezes by. Goosebumps moment, right? You know why goosebumps? Because the crowd went absolutely nuts.
Wild.
Like ham for Hammy, berserk for the Brit, pandemonium on the freaking podium. Like they're just like, at this point they're like, there's hope that Hamilton will have a podium and it will be here. Like, and for a moment I was like, well crap, if he's doing this, like maybe he's got a shot at,
he could win.
Maybe he's got a shot at this. So right. I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about that Hamilton moment?
Oh man, I mean that shot from the crowd. I tweeted it. Quick plug at F1 on the Rocks on Twitter. I need more followers than my wife and Will and myself. So somebody follow us on Twitter, please.
Tweet at us, yeah.
But I saw some video from the crowd right there at that turn when they both go wide, and that was interesting because Perez and Leclerc, right, are battling, and Leclerc kind of forces Perez wide and kind of runs him wide a little bit, so Perez has to cut the corner and then consequently runs Leclerc wide, and Hamilton, I'll just sneak right through here, and the call was great. Through goes Hamilton. I mean, It was just like, it was so good. It was the F1's version of down goes Frazier. Yeah, I loved it. So questionable moves we were talking about a little bit, right? So we were talking before we started recording about these questionable moves. Perez had a handful of them, kind of forcing people wide and running them off the track a little bit. Verstappen on Mick Schumacher, same thing. We'll get to that as well. You know I'm pumped about that. And they're not leaving space for each other. And it's actually, and I was sitting in the race thinking the same thing. Number one, I was thinking, please, stewards, don't get involved. Like, this is too good. I don't want any 5-second penalties here, right? It's like playoff hockey or playoff football or something. And it's like, put the whistles away. We don't want this decided by the stewards or the refs or whatever it might be. And it wasn't, which was great. They didn't give any warnings or anything either. And that's because in April of 2022, the FIA came out with these new rules that basically said everything those guys were doing on Sunday is completely fine, completely legal. Yeah. Which is wild, and we'll link that in the show notes. There's a great motorsport, I think it's motorsport article. That had
put it in the podcast description and put it up on the website for today's post. So then, if I'm hearing you correctly, right, the question back to you then is, we're seeing the same type of officiating that we see in professional sports, right? Like it's kind of been a let them play type mentality with the understanding that as long as no one's being put in harm's way with some of these really tight corners, kind of forcing somebody out for that line when you have the speed, like. Is that kind of how you see this? Like maybe too much control last season, and this season, let's see what happens if we don't over dictate what should be happening in corners?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know how to see it. Like I see it one way is, hey, Verstappen was a real pain in the ass in 2021 doing all of these things. How can we make this easier to regulate, to steward, essentially? Sure. And like in this link, it really goes through all of the detail. We won't sit and read it because everybody will be asleep by the time we're done. But it's very interesting. I think it was done to make regulating it easier. But we'll see. I mean, it was great racing, right? But what I would hate to see 2021 Brazil type stuff where Hamilton gets run way off the track, blatantly obvious. Like that's the stuff that you don't want to get back to. But Silverstone was incredible, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, if they're doing the proper policies and procedures and driver training, in between seasons and in between races, then it should be an issue. But picking up, because we got to zip through this, there's a lot of fun stuff that we have for the podcast fam coming up, and there's a little bit left of the race. So third, Perez gets by Hamilton eventually, moves the gap towards Sainz. It's looking like probably not going to happen just because Sainz is kind of taken off on those new tires. He's got the speed. He's got what he needs in terms of downforce, and ends up losing, a place to Leclerc. So I see Hamilton kind of pushing to burn down Leclerc's old tires until he gets into third with a super DRS pass. And again, same thing, crowd goes absolutely freaking nuts. But I think that's one of those things, again, you see Hamilton, you go 7-time world champion, he's pushing Leclerc in corners. Here you go, I'm coming at you. Here you go, I'm coming at you. And you know that those tires are like, I can't do this much longer.
Right.
And then
how about them through cops?
Yeah, I mean
that was insane.
It's a duo, just a little shootout basically, and that's why I said to sprint or not to sprint. This became basically what was like a 10 to 14 lap shootout, and I thought it was impeccable. All of this is going on in the front, and then you've got Lando and Alonso teeing off back and forth, and you've got Schumacher and Verstappen because he's back now trying to survive basically in the points. And Schumacher's like, look, dude, I respect your number one in the points in your team, but I am not going to give up on this opportunity to score more points. And I respect that. I respect it a lot. The Schumacher camp is feeling pretty good after this weekend. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. What a weight off his shoulders. So he ended up finishing 8th. I mean, he could have had 7th. Verstappen was really towing the line there, I think, with Mick toward the end. And I'm watching those last 2 laps, and really I'm just like, Mick, just take the 8th place. just take it and run, man. Don't do anything stupid.
He wouldn't have lived that one down on Drive to Survive if he ended up making a little mistake there. So
right.
Yeah,
like what he did in Miami, chucking it into Vettel with like 2 laps left. Dude, take your points. But anyway, big weight off his shoulders. His mom was there, his sister was there. At the race, big celebrations. A lot of the after race stuff was really cool, spraying him with champagne, and it was just fun to see. I know we dog on Mick a lot, but I've got a soft spot for him. He seems just like a very, very good person, which is nice.
So we hit the crashes, we hit the chaos that ensued in Silverstone Grand Prix, and then we've got our boy Carlos coming out with his first pole and his first win in the same weekend, putting a little zipper on all the naysayers, the haters
That's
out
right.
there. So pretty cool. What was the gold trophy that FIA gave Carlos on the podium? Do you know what that was?
I had to Google it. I saw the what's his name? Mohammed Ben Sulayem or whatever, the FIA president.
New FIA pres, yeah.
Yeah, it comes out with this big ass gold trophy and hands it to him, and Carlos has like the gold trophy, the champagne, the first place trophy, trying to carry this stuff off. He's got the flag on his back. And Bridget actually asked me too. She's like, "What the hell is that?" I have no idea. So we Googled it. I guess it's a British GP specific trophy, given by the Royal Automobile Club.
Interesting.
Yeah. But weird. I mean, I haven't seen it in any other race. I mean, I could be clueless, but
hey, if there's one
that was
way
interesting
to fill up your hardware cabinet, it's with multiple pieces of hardware on your first victory. Like, I mean, so my big takeaway for the whole race was essentially that, man, it was an outstanding, really invigorating, fun race to watch. Really gives me, a lot of energy moving into the Red Bull ring and what's to come in the season. But also, the biggest takeaway is that everyone was safe coming out of what, for a moment, appeared to be like a pretty nasty situation, and that's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it is impressive that cars moving at a couple 100 miles an hour can have crazy accidents, and everybody just gets out and walks away.
I've got some segments. I'm taking this one, Brian. This one's for you. Here you go.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
This segment for today's podcast is called Failure to Communicate. And
Nailed it.
I'm going to acknowledge once again that I am an armchair racer. I think we are armchair racers, but
For sure.
Here you can have my professional opinion on some race strategy missteps that might have occurred at Silverstone. We can start with Ferrari. So I got a little bit of a preface here. Someone found Giuseppe, I'm pulling it up, Giuseppe Caruso is Ferrari's HR guy. Someone found him on LinkedIn, on Reddit.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Opens a LinkedIn message and titles the message and types it this way. Dear Giuseppe Caruso, I would like to apply for the lead strategist position at Scuderia Ferrari. Despite the lack of experience, I am confident that I can outperform the current employee while asking for lower wages. Please let me know if there's an opportunity for me. Kind regards. And signs his name. I mean, hilarious way to take a little dig at them, but some stupid radio calls. Just
Oh, my God.
really
That's
stupid radio
The
calls.
strategy was pathetic. It was pathetic. I mean, we could do a whole episode on how bad Ferrari's strategy was. And it's not just the safety car side of it. It's well before that, right? I mean, so before we get to the safety car stuff, earlier in the race, Sainz is leading. Verstappen's essentially out at this point, right? He's back in sixth. He's dropping. Sainz is leading. Leclerc's on his ass. And Hamilton is 5 seconds behind. Hamilton's 4 seconds behind. Hamilton's 3 seconds behind.
Breathing down the neck, yep.
Leclerc, who's being a gentleman at this point, is on the radio like, "Hey, Verstappen, or not Verstappen, Hamilton's catching us. Like, am I allowed to go past him? Are we fighting? What are we doing with Carlos?" And they get on the radio, "Hey, Carlos, we need a 132.9 or whatever it is. Okay, give me one more lap to do it." Over and over and over. Meanwhile, Hamilton's just chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. I love Carlos Sainz. I am a Carlos Sainz fan. I'm a McLaren fan. Carlos was at McLaren, obviously. I'm a Carlos Sainz fan. Leclerc is so much faster than Carlos Sainz this year. It's insane. He was missing missing an end plate, 5 points of downforce,
Still catching.
and he's
Carlos.
all over him.
Yeah. The funny part was, though, Brian, that like even with that message to Carlos, like, hey, we need this lap time, or, we're going to have another conversation. They had that for like 9 laps. They should have, if they had just on lap 1 said, you need to hit this lap time in the next 2 laps, or we're going to let Leclerc by, right?
Right.
But they let it go on, and they let it go on, and they let it go on. And so, yeah, I mean, there you end up with frustration that is seeded and planted for what then occurs later on in the race. And, obviously, I don't know. It made me a little upset there. Just with the way that they kind of handled it. So,
and moving on to the later on in the race thing, the later on in the race with the safety car, that doesn't exist. That whole controversy doesn't happen if they had just let Leclerc pass Sainz right off the bat. Leclerc's going to be off into the distance when that safety car happens. He's going to have a 20-second gap.
Yep.
So that controversy never happens. Speaking of, so the safety car happens. Ocon pulls over. My 6-year-old, who's sitting on the couch watching it next to me, knows there is going to be a safety car. Right? Ocon's car is stopped on track. She's 6. She knows there's a safety car coming out. All of the staff in Fiorano, is that right? I could be totally wrong and make myself sound like an idiot there. But
I don't know.
Ferrari HQ,
Yeah.
there are people there, right? Strategists there. There are people at the track. They've got computers telling them, if we pit now, we're going to come out here. If a safety car happens now, this is what we're doing. The safety car happens. They said between 6 and 11 seconds to make a decision on what to do. What to do? You bring in your horse that's got the only chance in the Drivers' Championship, who's leading the race, who's on the older tires, and you bring him in and you give him new tires.
Yep.
What are we talking about?
Well, step one, you bring him in and leave Carlos out, or listener question from Ryan McAbee, a Phoenix listener, goes, Ferrari said they didn't pit Leclerc because they didn't have time between cars. When the yellow flag came out, he was still 4.7 seconds ahead. Isn't that enough time for a double stop? I mean, if Ferrari did their job in the pit, yes, you rip one in, you rip the other one in, and even then, if you send both cars in and somehow someone gets between you, you still have fresher tires on someone who didn't pit, and you can just pass them anyways. Like
exactly, because the only argument there with the double stack, and I totally agree, you double stack it. And granted, hindsight's 2020. We're armchair race strategists. We get it, right?
Non-professional, professional.
But you double stack, even if Sainz has to wait 2-3 seconds to get his boots on, he goes out, and the thought is, okay, Hamilton sees both the Ferraris go in, he stays out, right? Okay, so Hamilton's starting on old, cold, hard tires, and you pass them in half a lap.
Yep.
It's mind-blowing how a team like Ferrari can fuck up over and over and over and over.
They were. It seems to me that someone was back there chasing a delta, right? Like someone's crunching a number, going, "This is the number we want. This is the number we want. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it." And no one pressured him to be like, "Well, why are you looking for that number when there's all these other opportunities?"
Right.
And if they had, maybe if we didn't force it on a better tire, the takeaway is. Happy for Sainz win. Leclerc got robbed in all this. Unnecessary tension inside the team. I mean, they should be focused solely on a constructor and the Drivers' Championship for the driver who has the most points. But you pointed out Leclerc's podiums.
1 in the last 7 races. Yeah. He hasn't won a race since Australia. That's insane, man. 4 or 5 races into the season, maybe 3 or 4 races into the season, we were like, wow, Ferrari might run away with this. Boy,
okay.
How the turntables.
This is where I'm going to take us down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I know that we're running long, but this is important, okay? So this is Conspiracy Theory 101, okay? And this is down a Reddit rabbit hole for people who are big Ferrari fans, okay? I have to read this to you guys. Some of it is a little bit over my head, but it's good to know. So here's the characters in this story that you need to know. Number 1, Todd is the former Ferrari principal and the past FIA prez. He's a legend.
Jean Todt, right?
Jean Todt. Yep. Jean Todt. The second character is Mattia, the current Ferrari principal. The third character is Elkin, who's a current executive chairman at Ferrari. Okay. This guy pops onto Reddit, and somebody was basically asking some of the same questions that we're asking here about Ferrari and the drama. And this guy goes, do you want the long version or the short version? And somebody on Reddit goes, the long version, obviously. And he goes, okay, buckle up. It's interesting as fuck. So it all started in late 2021 with the rumors of Todt returning as supervisor counselor to Ferrari. The same rumors said that Mattia was in support of it because Elkin had already put some pressure on them. And 2, John Elkin can talk down to Todd even if he wanted to. So, a while later, there were some untrustworthy rumors about Elkin already going sour on Mattia, being like, I don't know if they're going to work together, because Mattia was vocal about Todt returning. Lo and behold, Bahrain 1 and 2, and the Duchessa makes a Twitter post saying the reason why Mattia was on the constructors' podium was not to represent the team, but himself. Kind of calling him out like this is all about him. Send a signal to Maranello that under him, Ferrari returned to the podium. Kind of like, hey, we're here because I'm team principal. Come the recent fuck-ups and winless poles, and after the British GP with the finger wiggling at Charles, there are a couple of articles saying that Ferrari did what they did because recently the CEO was present at the track to make sure Ferrari wins, meaning Ferrari chose a temporary win over a critical WDC win. The media, especially Italian media, obviously are taking this to heart and lit it on fire, calling the GP win a Pyrrhic victory. Added to the rumors of last year's Monza argument between Charles and Mattia, still, again, a rumor, not necessarily proven, but plausible, plus the recent strategy fuck-ups directly affecting Charles, there are some sources saying that Leclerc and Mattia are going sour too, just like Mattia and Elkin. There are all kinds of internal struggles, but as someone who keeps meticulous records of Ferrari's internal wars since '97, Mattia's neck is on the line. He may not well be the team principal next year. Expect the results of what I said to be either true or completely bullshit, and to be decided by Spa or Monza. Now, again,
Wow.
super rabbit hole thing. Like, when I started reading this, I was like, wait a minute.
Get your tinfoil hat on.
This is insane. Like, if this guy's right, though, I'm going to, like, message him in a couple months and be like,
Seriously.
spot on.
Get him on this show.
The thing that resonated with me, though, after I read this was shortly after, I saw a post of Leclerc and Mattia coming out of a dinner together at a fine dining restaurant in Monza.
I
like,
saw that in Monaco, yeah.
PR stunt, or are they actually having dinner and trying to hash some stuff out? I don't know.
Right. Dude, that finger wag, nothing good comes with a finger wag like that.
I don't put my finger in people's faces because I don't want their fist coming back at mine.
Right, exactly.
That's a nada.
I mean, imagine how pissed Leclerc was coming off, getting out of the car, pissed off as it is. That was my race to win. My team yanked it away from me. Good for Carlos. And the Harry Potter characters there waiting to shake his finger at you. Like, woof.
It sucks too because, and I think I commented on a previous podcast that Leclerc had previously, when something went wrong, came in, parked the car, mechanical failure, gets out, walks up to his team, checks on them, thank you. Like, he was being a good sportsman. And so I think in this instance, what we're seeing is good sportsman. I'm getting tired. This is enough. What is happening? You know, and so. Yeah.
Enough will be enough eventually for Leclerc. The problem is, where does he go?
Yeah.
He's under contract through 24. He is a talent, man. I really think very highly of Leclerc. I think it's Verstappen, Leclerc are kind of in their own realm with Hamilton, and then it's like the George Russell, Lando Norris. I mean, time will tell, but I rate him very highly. The problem is, if he eventually says, all right, fuck you, Ferrari, I'm out of here, where's he go? You don't want to be Verstappen's teammate.
No, that's a good question, because then you end up competing even more and more. Yeah, that's the Ferrari bit. I pulled a sound clip for you, Brian. I think that with the success of Haas and having a double podium, Gunther Steiner might have actually been saying this about Ferrari.
Bunch of freaking clowns.
A bunch of clowns. That's what they look like down in the pit. But that wasn't the only failure to communicate. Obviously, you know, Yuki, does Pierre get kind of annoyed with Yuki kind of continually causing him some race difficulties? I mean, this isn't the first time. It's happened at least 2 times already this season. Also, too, we saw that Yuki's mess up screwed Max, in the sense that he had debris from that little turnaround stuck on the track that Max ran over and screwed Max's race. So, like, Yuki dog, you're going to have to pick it up here. I mean,
I know it. I root so hard for Yuki too. I don't know why. I just like him. But I don't know, man. I mean, it was interesting. Gasly today, I saw just before we started recording. Gasly, I don't know, like posted some nice picture of the two of them or something or whatever. But Helmut Marko, who, like Nelson Piquet, is a world-class asshole in my opinion, said, like, in a really mean way, that they got, like, we're hiring a psychiatrist to work with him or something like that. It's just like, dude, why do you need to publicize all that shit? Like, sports psychiatrists are a dime a dozen. Every professional athlete's using them. Like, you don't need to try to belittle Yuki. He probably feels like shit enough as it is. Yeah. Like, but that's just Helmut Marko's thing.
And I think the thing that Yuki has going for him is that there's support with Pierre, right? It could easily be another teammate who's just I don't have time for this. Like, you're slowing me down. Stop slowing me down. But, like, Pierre, for some reason, just has this bit of compassion. And maybe it's just the fact that he's been with AlphaTauri for so long that it's kind of like, this is my home, and I take pride in the team that I've created, and you're part of that team now, so you get what you get. But that takes care of the old failure to communicate segment. Brian, thank you for allowing me to dive into that rabbit hole. I'm going to give you this nice thing so that way you can introduce the next segment. Oh, it didn't play. It was supposed to be drum roll. Drum roll.
We're pouring one out. We got to rip through our pour one outs because we're not getting too long. Well, we're getting a little long. All right, we'll rip through them. So the last review, we talked about Mick missing the points, getting screwed with a mechanical failure, and he needed a strong weekend. Boom, there you have it. Strong weekend. 8th place, first points, double points for Haas since 2019. The German GP.
They tweeted it out, and like the Twitter post just went like super viral because it's like, you know, they've basically had that like stored and saved in drafts for like years, and there's like, send, yes,
we got it,
we did it. Yeah,
that GP was crazy. Yeah, that was nuts. Yeah. That's a good one to go back and watch.
Yeah, and a good one for Haas to end up in double points. I think like it shows they did the work there. So
yeah, and they haven't had a single upgrade on their car yet, and they're still scoring points.
So. I don't think they're going to. That's the funny part. I think they're sitting still on that, but for another time. So
we'll see.
We didn't you introduced pour one out, but you didn't introduce the power of the pour one out. So for
True.
all of our listeners who've been listening, we've been doing this pour one out segment where it's like we feel bad for someone, and then the next race they typically do good. And so that happened. We felt bad for Joe, and then he had a good race. And then we talked about Joe again, and it had the counter effect. So like this pour one out, it's got some weird magical power to it. And now that Joe back in action after his last race with, consistent with almost zero driver errors. And obviously this wasn't his error, I don't think, in any shape, form, or capacity.
Yeah,
his car got
totally
snapped and flipped. But, tough go of it, man. Tough go for Joe.
I know it. I mean, that was... What are you going to do? I mean... He crawls out alive, unscathed. So hopefully he'll bounce back here in Austria. And Latifi's off the Schneid.
Right.
He's not 21st.
He's not. He's no longer 21st on the grid thanks to a little bit of a better finish. I mean, he missed points by 2 places. Yeah, and even here's the thing though, he had the car that didn't have the upgrades that Albon had, and he put in a consistent performance from start to finish. So we got to give him credit for that. He didn't get in the points, but he was pretty darn close. I'm thinking that this gives him momentum. I've heard some contextual stuff though too, where it's like, this isn't saving his seat. Like he would basically need to finish like in the points for every race for the end of the season, and then maybe like that changes the conversation. But as far as Piastri is concerned, it's likely a done deal unless some other random team opens up a seat and Piastri's like, nah, I'm gonna go take the better performing car. So
Yeah, exactly. I've got one last pour one out that I didn't put on here, but I'm wearing the Danny Rick shirt.
Danny,
if you could see it. But pouring out for Danny Rick, this poor bastard finished 13th out of 14 cars. I mean, basically dead last. We don't have to get into it. I'm just sending my positive thoughts to Danny Rick.
We're gonna unanimously pour one out for Danny Rick in this episode, so that next episode we can talk about the positive effects the pour one out had on him.
Yes, agreed. So before we jump into race preview, I just want to talk about Sainz a little bit, real quick. We'll just kind of go through Sainz, just because he is one of my favorite drivers. He's been in F1 for a long time, and he's super well liked.
Carlos
that was one of the
Sainz Vasquez de Castro.
Yes, well done.
Gotcha.
I'm a driver for Ferrari. I love this guy. Everybody in the paddock loves him. That was one of the things I heard him in a couple interviews afterwards, and he was I think in the F1 Nation podcast, and he was just saying like, hey, it's just been so great. Everyone's been so happy for me. Drivers, mechanics, you name it, media personalities, which is awesome. I think he's just a good dude. So he was a Red Bull Junior. Like a lot of people don't know, he was a Red Bull Junior with Verstappen. So he was with Toro Rosso 2015 to 2017, and he was probably the only teammate Verstappen has had that has been somewhat comparable. I don't remember. Yeah, for sure. I don't remember like what their quality stats were, but they were like relatively even. And granted, Verstappen was 17 or whatever at the time, but pretty impressive. So then he moves to Renault and races with Hülkenberg, most handsome driver pairing since sliced bread.
Yeah, those are the two guys that get January on the driver calendar. If we're honest, right? Yeah.
for sure. So he's there for 2 seasons, does okay. The Renault during that time was awful. It was really bad. And then moves to McLaren with Lando. Who knew Lando was so good, right? And I think once Sainz left and Lando started beating the shit out of Daniel Ricciardo, everybody's like, wow, Sainz must be pretty talented too, and he's done a good job at Ferrari thus far. I mean, Ferrari is definitely a team that favors a driver, no matter what they say. When Seb was on his way out of Ferrari, all of a sudden Leclerc's car is faster, right?
Yeah.
They favor a driver, which is fine. That only one driver can win the drivers' championship, so totally understand it. But I'm a huge Sainz fan. I'm super pumped about that win. So just wanted to get in my quick 2-minute segment about my friend Carlos.
Yeah, Bailey and I. So since we obviously flashed through Drive to Survive years ago, Bailey and I have been strong Carlos Sainz fans. One thing that I've always loved about Carlos is his passion for his family. You mentioned that him and Verstappen were at Toro Rosso, and obviously the lineage there, right? Carlos's dad raced, Max's dad raced, so like it's nice to see this generational lineage, but also the way that Carlos has taken care of his cousin, right? That is there in the pit with him. I'm not crazy. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's so nice to see that like every one of Carlos's kind of segments in Drive to Survive is him pointing back to his family, and family's important to me. So that was really cool to see. I'm really proud of Carlos. I hope this keeps going, but with the drama and the things that have ensued at Ferrari, my hopes are optimistic.
I think so too.
We've got some notes for what is referred to for our podcast listeners. The Austrian Grand Prix is referred to as the Red Bull Ring. It's up in the Styrian Mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the one I want to go to.
Yeah. Anybody want to fly us out? There's a couple days left.
Anybody
listening want to fly us out? We'll take you with us, but you're paying.
The place is awesome. So it was purchased. It was the A1 ring. I think it was called the Ostrich ring or something prior to that. Yeah. Then it was the A1 ring. And then Dietrich Messerschmitt bought it. The owner of Red Bull bought it in 2001, maybe, something like that. Renamed it the Red Bull Ring, made some changes so F1 could come back. I think they came back maybe in 2014. But a very interesting track. It's kind of unique. I mean, it's short. It's quick. The lap is like a minute 10 maybe race pace. I think in quali they'll get down to like a minute 6 or 7.
God willing, no rain.
God willing, no rain. I want to see a dry race, or at least a dry quali.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're in quali trim with low fuel, and I mean, there's nothing better than those cars on the limit. So when quali's wet, it's always a bummer. But it's
also,
sprint race weekend.
Yeah, so that means that we only have FP1, quali, FP2, sprint. So there's for our listeners, we've got some kind of out of sort. It's not the norm. But as you saw at the end of Silverstone, the sprints are legit fire. I mean, like, these guys are not going to hold back at this point. Pop the car out. Hopefully don't do too much damage because you were trying to force it into a corner and your team can get it spun around for the race. But I love the sprint race days, man. Sprints are so fun.
Me too. I mean, the best thing in the world is qualifying on a Friday night. You get home from work, you get to watch quali. Saturday, you've got something to watch. That's not just practice. So I love it. And they changed the point system a little bit. So the top 8 now receive points and a fair amount of points. So top 8 receive points. The winner gets 8 points, and then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Was it 10 before? Was it the top 10 before?
It was the top 3. And I think it was 3, 2, 1 were the only points for the sprint. So this is interesting because I think what they found last year was like, okay, we'll do the first lap or two, and then everyone kind of holds position. They don't want to fuck up the race because they're not racing for points anyway. So this will be very interesting. But we'll see. Yeah. I'm excited to see how it shakes out.
Imagine Perez closing the gap on Max even further with a little bit of a sprint push. I don't know. You never know.
So tires this weekend, they're on the softest compounds, C3, C4, and C5. So just super quick explanation of the tire compounds for those new to F1. There's 5 different sets of tires, C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And C5 are the softest, C1 are the hardest. And they pick 3 different compounds to have at each race. So, for example, at Silverstone, they were on C1, 2, and 3, which are the hardest compounds.
Yeah.
So at Silverstone, the C3 was the soft, when this week in Austria, the C3 is going to be the hard. So it's just interesting, something to keep in mind. And obviously it's based on a ton of things. how long the track is, the stress on the tires, high-speed corners, things like that, like
Track
Maggots,
surface,
Beckett's, Cops, all these different corners at Silverstone would just not hold up with these C3, 4, and 5 tires. So that'll be very interesting. I mean, these tires are still relatively new. We've only had 10 races or 9 races, whatever it is. So I think the teams are still learning a little bit about them. So it should be very interesting.
Some would say Sainz peaked with his pole and victory last weekend, but they would be mistaken not to acknowledge that Carlos Sainz holds the lap record at the Red Bull Ring.
Boom.
1 minute, 5 seconds, and 0.619 10 thousandths of a second.
What year?
2020. So we've skipped
in a McLaren.
Year. Yeah, we've skipped a year. So we did it in a McLaren, which is just weird.
Yeah.
But cool to know. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Sainz keeps the momentum going. So we already know Red Bull and Ferrari are the cars to beat. I think Ferrari's going to make some car changes. I think Mercedes, knowing what they know data-wise from the last race with their new floor, will also make some changes. Could be an interesting race between the top 6 cars here. I'm going to include Mercedes in the top 6 cars. So
yeah, I agree, and it's a very racy track, right? We often have good racing. Last year we had some penalties dished out for people getting forced off the track and into the gravel. So we'll see what happens there. But I think in 2021 and in 2020, they did back-to-back races there, back-to-back weeks. It was kind of like their COVID home a little bit. They did the Austrian Grand Prix and then the Styrian Grand Prix. They're in the Styrian Mountains. Yeah. So that was interesting. But let's move on to bets, my man.
Yeah, so last week you had Lando on podium. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, you were close, but not quite. Yes, closer than I was with Russell on the podium. Felt really good about it, qualifying. I was like, all right, we got this. This is doable. He'll sneak in. He'll get a little strategy, and then nope, he's just out. And I'm like, cool, there goes that bet.
Didn't even make it to the first turn.
Yeah, sucks. Who are you taking for Austria?
Man, I try to make it a bit of a stretch. So I try to stay away from those top 3 teams. So I think Fernando Alonso is going to be on the podium this week.
That's a good one. He's had some consistent performances, and I feel like that little bit of a kick last week would be good for him.
I think that Alpine's good.
I like your style. I've been typically going with a more risque type bet, but I'm going to change things this time. I'm going to go with a parlay. I'm going to take Checo for the win with a Russell podium because I really want Russell on the podium. So I'm going to parlay Checo win.
Love it.
Russell podium. Yeah.
I love it, man.
By the way, if you guys missed last week's podcast, we kind of did like a segue podcast. We dabbled a bit in rumors, and so it appears, according to some research that Brian has pulled up, that Red Bull and Porsche are going to be announcing the partnership for 2026 this weekend.
Supposedly. So that's what I saw when I wrote that note in our outline. And then I saw another tweet this morning that was like, from Formula Racers, was like, it hasn't been signed yet. May not be announced. But I think it's going to happen. It just may not be announced this week.
They're teasing it. They're just doing the tease thing. They're trying to get the extra media around it. You got to. It's like
big time media outlets like F1 on the Rocks talking about it.
Yeah. Well, we have clout, so that's all that matters. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, the Grid Rivals, we've got some massive enrollment in the Grid Rivals team league over the last week, which thanks to all the podcast listeners who were like, I'm in. I basically direct texted people and harassed them. I was like, you need to join this league. So thank you for doing that. If you haven't and you listen to the podcast, you caught today's live stream on the website, f1ontherocks.com. There's actually a link. If you just click the Grid Rivals link, it'll take you to our league. You can jump into the league. Trust me, it's not too late. Here's why it's not too late. I'm salty. 3 of my drivers in both of my leagues DNF'd, ruining the amazing... I was just like crushing. I was like, got this team killing points, like leaving people in the dust. And then Bailey was watching the race with me. I was like, oh no, like
one after another.
Like this is not working for me. So also Brian didn't read the rules.
Not a rule guy.
So if you join the league, there's a little bit of a chat too. So type in the chat if you've got a question and we'll help you. Like obviously we don't want to just like crush you and not give you the assistance you need to lose anyways. But there's rules like you need to pick what's it called?
Driver constructor.
No, there's it's bonus points for a driver. I should know the term if I'm referencing this, but you've
Like
got
a
to
hot driver or
star. You've
whatever.
got to star a driver, and that person will give you double points. Everyone that was banking, which I looked through our league, there were quite a few people that were banking on Albon. So like people picked Albon because of the upgrades and were like, yeah, he's gonna do really well. Just didn't see the accident coming, taking him out. So that kind of sucked for Albon and the points in the grid rivals. But yeah, join in the grid rivals league. There's no one is too far ahead for you to catch, so it can still be good.
Yeah. Before we leave, quick shout out to Ross Braun and these new regulations. I mean, if you've sat through the turbo hybrid era with Mercedes dominating and nobody being able to follow each other, and now you see a race like Silverstone, and it's like, man, these cars are right on each other. They can stay behind each other, and they're not burning up their tires. They're not sitting in dirty air. It is awesome, and I'm here for it. So shout out to Ross Braun.
Yeah, good stuff. Listen, Brian mentioned it before, but we need some love on Twitter. He's been killing it with getting the Twitter posts out and generating some additional content to kind of keep everybody engaged in what's going on in between the week, stuff that we might talk about. If you've been listening and you've been enjoying the show and you have the energy, pop open your favorite social media app, share out the website, f1ontherocks.com on your social media. Go ahead and find us and just like and follow those accounts so that we can garner a little bit of additional trust. We're doing our work on the back end to keep growing. Proud to be on video today despite the turbulence at the beginning, and hopefully we can keep that rocking in the future. We'll get this stuff posted to YouTube so you guys can watch if you prefer to watch instead of just listen. But that's it for now, fam. We'll be back next week after the Austrian Grand Prix. Be safe, be well. Brian, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to F1 on the Rocks. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe now and watch for updates at f1ontherocks.com and on social at F1 on the Rocks.